refusal to concede the election, we have Trump's campaign manager addressing his latest comments. Plus, we're 1 week away from Election Day. What does the end of the trail look like? It's all ahead on this edition of VALPO Townhall. Hello and thank you for joining us on VALPO Townhall here on VUTV. I'm Micah Topel alongside Carlos Cabaya, the Republican representative, and Eric Smith, the Democratic representative. Thanks for being here tonight, guys. Donald Trump has made headlines this past week as he told supporters he'd only accept the results of the election if he won. I want to open our show today with initial thoughts from our guests. Carlos, we'll start with you. What are your opinions on his lack of agreeing to concede to the election results?
Well, Micah, can you honestly tell me where in the Constitution it says that the losing candidate has to concede the election? You know, in 2000, Al Gore didn't concede the election. He went as far as going to the Supreme Court to have the votes recounted. And Trump didn't say he wouldn't concede the election. He said he'll look at it at the time, which means since the polls are so tight, that means that the election could be a toss-up. And since votes don't really count on November 8th, there's a two-week leeway for votes to be counted. So we have to give him some time to think about it, I guess you could put it that way. But there is nowhere in the Constitution that it says that the losing candidate have to concede the election. That is just a formality.
This is absolutely a ridiculous opinion. Never in modern presidential history we've had a candidate refuse to accept the election results.
Al Gore in 2000?
And the Al Gore example is a logical fallacy. Al Gore did not, in the 3 weeks, month prior, dispute the results of the election. He conceded the election, then the media networks withdrew Bush's win in Florida, and then he unconceded and waited for the recount to take place, and yes, took it to the Supreme Court. He did not preemptively, for the month beforehand, start contesting the results of the election. And also to Carlos' second point, the election is not that close. If you look at any of the aggregate polling places, Clinton has a solid 4 to 5%.
Well, it's going to tighten up the polls now that the investigation on Clinton's emails are reopened.
Regardless of the point, she's winning in most battleground states, and he is losing. It's part of his ego. He cannot understand that he could possibly be losing this election, even though he has made inflammatory comments about women, has a university that was fraudulent, and has just insulted Gold Star families, insulted women, you name it. He's probably pissed someone off, and he can't accept.
And Hillary Clinton is a criminal.
But it is unprecedented for a presidential candidate to not accept the results of the election.
It is a formality. There's nowhere in the Constitution it says that you have to concede the election. Nowhere. Can you tell me where?
It's part of the tradition of the United States to concede when you lose.
It's a very formality thing. And like this election is very unusual. Well, Trump can do unusual things.
Yes, it's unusual because you have a man like Trump as the nominee of a major party. And the problem is, you see this in crackpot democracies where when the opposition leader or the head of the government knows he's about to lose, he starts claiming rigged elections. This is not something we see in the United States. And
I'm not surprised.
He has brought our democracy into the gutter through this sort of discussion, and it is reprehensible to the American democracy that we call our own.
I mean, the Democratic primary was basically rigged, so I'm not surprised that Trump is going to say that the election itself is rigged.
That's just ridiculous.
Well, we actually have a video of Kellyanne Conway speaking with Wolf Blitzer. Trump's campaign manager Kellyanne Conway is speaking with Wolf Blitzer in this clip that we're about to show.
He has said it depends on what the results are. He cannot make that judgment now any more than Hillary Clinton.
But if there's no recount, no challenges, no significant discrepancies, he will concede.
It depends. It depends,
on what?
Well, you said no significant discrepancies. Is there evidence of widespread voter fraud somewhere, or?
But I've just said if there isn't widespread voter fraud.
That's a very tough hypothetical for me to answer.
Guys, do you think that there's any major discrepancies in this election, any voter fraud? We've talked about whether Trump would concede or not, obviously, but is there any fraud or anything that you think would be behind?
No. Voter fraud is a right-wing conspiracy that is played up to justify these extremely strict voter ID laws after the Supreme Court gutted the Voter Rights Act. The United States voter fraud percentage is practically near zero, and the Republicans seem to lack basic understanding of how an election is run. So it is not a national election. There's not a national body that runs our elections. You have the states run the elections, the local governments who run those, and then the precincts. So for there to be a rigged election, you'd have to have a conspiracy across so many election officials to be unprecedented. This is nothing more than a distraction from the fact that the Republicans are losing, and they're losing badly, not just in the presidential race, but in the down-ballot races. And saying rigged elections somehow justifies this and justifies their archaic voter ID laws, which are meant to target minority voters, older voters, and younger people, all constituencies that they struggle with.
Oh, but when Al Gore in 2000 said that the election was rigged, it's okay. So if a Republican does it, it's bad, but if a Democrat does it, it's not. Well, let's not forget Debbie Wasserman-Schultz rigged the Democratic primary. So rigging the whole election itself, it's not a hard thing to do.
So I'm going to take both of those points. So with the Al Gore thing, Al Gore lost the popular vote. I'm sorry, Al Gore won the popular vote and lost the Electoral College, but still conceded the election at the end, and he peacefully transferred the power to the Republican candidate, even though he probably had a stronger mandate to argue he'd won the election. Debbie Wasserman-Schultz. So I like how Republicans seem to be so concerned about the Democratic primary. Bernie Sanders, I'm sorry, was never a Democrat. He's an independent. So it's not surprising that the DNC tried to favor Hillary Clinton, but they did not rig the election process. She was shown certain favoritisms, but there's no voter rigging. These are completely different items, and the Republicans keep trying to think that if they appeal to the Bernie Sanders voters, these people are going to shift back over, and we've not seen that in the polling.
If it wasn't a rigged DNC primary, then why did she resign?
She resigned under political pressure that came about from Sanders supporters, part of the compromise
People
to keep the
don't
party
resign just
together.
from pressure. If people resign from pressure, then Obama would have resigned a long time ago.
So these are completely different things. The presidency and the head of the DNC are not relatable, but I guess I will take
They
this point
both
as
take
well.
high responsibilities within their respective positions.
So as part of the party coming together afterwards, Debbie Wasserman-Schultz stepped down, which was good for the party, as we've seen in the election results. The Republicans take a page or two about coming together as a party, as we saw Ted Cruz unable to endorse Donald Trump during the primary or during the convention, and we still have John Kasich, who's refused to endorse Donald Trump. So the Republicans take a page of the Democrats' book about coalescing as a party, because that's where Trump is losing this election, because the Republicans' party is not coalesced around him.
Okay, well, we actually have another clip coming up. Both candidates are not slowing down as we are 1 week away from the election. CNN's Mary Maloney shows us what the end of this campaign trail is looking like.
With less than 2 weeks of campaigning left, Hillary Clinton and Donald Trump are showing no signs of slowing.
Listening to Donald Trump's campaign, I truly doubt that he has ever read the Constitution.
Honestly, she has less energy than Jeb Bush.
Trump didn't just have harsh words for Clinton. Before heading to rallies Wednesday, Trump held an opening ceremony at his newest luxury hotel in D.C. and chided a CNN reporter for questioning if he was using the stop for free publicity.
For you to ask me that question is actually very insulting, because Hillary Clinton does one stop and then she goes home and sleeps. And yet you'll ask me that question. I think it's a very rude question.
Former Speaker of the House and Donald Trump supporter Newt Gingrich called the hotel symbolic of what a Trump presidency would be.
A message that says you could actually come in under budget and ahead of schedule in this city is a really radical message.
Clinton, meanwhile, used Trump's moment to boost her own agenda, urging voters at a Florida rally not to fall for the hype.
If you have friends who are thinking of voting for Trump, I want you to tell them that he relied on undocumented workers to make his project cheaper.
And while she may be up in the polls, Clinton encouraged her supporters to make sure they support her when it counts.
Donald Trump says he can still win, and he's right. That's why it's so important everyone gets out and votes.
I'm Mary Maloney reporting.
So what's your guys' opinion on the whole Trump unveiling his new, the grand opening of his new hotel in Washington, D.C.? Do you think it's just free publicity, or something that's some free publicity that isn't fair, or just him running his business as usual and it's just convenient timing for him?
I think it's running his business as usual. I believe Trump has unveiled his hotels and resorts before on TV, not running for a presidential not running as a presidential candidate. So I think it's just running as business as usual. No really motives to it. It's just him unveiling his flagship hotel.
For a man who is so intent on winning the election, it seems like a very strange strategy to step off the campaign trail to open a hotel. And if we're going to talk about Trump running businesses, I guess we should also talk about his record of bankrupting casinos, which is an impressive feat in itself. I didn't know you could do that, actually. And being sued by most of his workers because he doesn't pay them properly. So if this is another example of Trump doing business, I shudder at him running our actual economy.
I mean, I suppose one of his arguments is that he uses the laws to his advantage, and that the bankruptcies and everything were completely within the reason. I guess, although obviously, I mean, you could interpret that as not being something that could translate into being a well-functioning way.
When he takes over as president, he'll continue the policies that favor the upper 1% like himself, which is why we cannot trust him to be president. We have one of the greatest wealth inequalities facing this nation, and electing Donald Trump will continue to exacerbate that difference between those two. I know this is maybe laughable to people like the Republicans who rely on those contributions, but Donald Trump will be more of the same policies that favor the upper 1% of this country.
The upper 1% are currently endorsing Hillary Clinton, by the way.
His policies will continue to favor the 1% in taxes, in these bankruptcy laws. So if it's business as usual, I'm afraid for our economy.
Too big to fail and too big to jail, that's Hillary Clinton, not Donald Trump.
No, too big to fail was unregulated financial sectors, which Donald Trump is completely...
Too big to fail was not unregulated financial sectors, it was businessmen.
So banks are not too big to fail, because that's what led to the bust of 2008, was banks that speculated with predatory lending in the housing market. And now Donald Trump wants to go back and deregulate the financial sector again, which would lead to a complete repeat of the 2008 bust.
If you've taken an economic class, well, you'll see that deregulation is the best way to economic growth.
No, deregulation is what allowed the economy to collapse in 2008, because you had, and you should take an economics class, because
unethical business motives and strategies.
Because there is no regulation on those
men. By the way, Wall Street is endorsing Hillary Clinton.
So again, he's ignoring the major factor is that Donald Trump is...
Obviously, Wall Street has something on Hillary Clinton that they want to put in law, so...
Donald Trump is pro-deregulation, pro-financial speculation, and pro-2008 bust all over again.
Well, that's quite a good discussion you guys had there. So how strong, although we'll get on to the next topic with how strong is the media bias in this election? Are reporters to blame? Just wait until you see the conversation between Wolf Blitzer and Kellyanne Conway up next. Stick with us.
Good morning, Valparaiso University. What's a better way to start your day than with a new jam? And WBUR has just what you need.
But if you close your eyes, does it almost feel like nothing changed at all? And if you close your eyes, does it... If Daniel won't change your mind, baby, right.
Broadcasting sports, news, weather, and music on air, online, and on campus. WVUR is my...
We've we've got an interview to show you here between Kellyanne Conway and Wolf Blitzer on CNN a few days ago regarding the election and their opinions on it. Here it is.
He points to them. He sort of eggs the crowd on to go after them. These, and there are a lot of young journalists. They're scared sometimes.
I know them all. I respect them all. I'm glad that they're
he shouldn't be doing that. I mean, could you talk to him and say to him, Mr. Trump, we only have a few days left. These are hardworking young journalists. They deserve to have some security, if you will, because some of those Trump supporters out there, they get pretty nasty in what they're screaming at these young people.
Well, look, your first point, yes, I will tell him that. Secondly, and he's probably watching right now, their Twitter feed is, for some of them, the Twitter feed is almost, we've done an analysis, 85, 90% negative towards Donald Trump. You didn't hear anything good to say. There's nothing good to report that day that you would actually put on your Twitter feed. So I think the responsibility has to go both ways. But you're right. I am open press. I believe in a free press. I believe in an honest press.
Kellyanne Conway has mentioned in that last clip that 80 to 85% of Twitter posts about Donald Trump are negative. Carlos, what is there, since the media clearly hasn't been covering it, what are some positive things that you wish the media were saying about Donald Trump?
Well, you see, voters are still adamant about voting for Trump. Polls show that the election is tightening, so there's still obviously something that voters are looking forward to with Donald Trump. With positivity within the media, everything that Donald Trump says and does, the media just goes and attacks him and never attacks Hillary Clinton. He has a new hotel. His policies, there are positive things that you could say about Donald Trump, and the media just chooses not to say anything positive about Donald Trump. And it's all negative. And I mean, like, that's how elections are run today. It's all negative commercials, negative debates, negative media. But when media is very one-sided towards Donald Trump and against Donald Trump, well, obviously there's going to be outrage from that side.
Okay, to that point, though, Donald Trump really won the primaries by using this sort of free media, by calling into CNN, by calling into these major cable networks to get his attention because he did not want to spend a lot of money on advertising, and has continued that strategy into the general election. So it's interesting now that he's upset by the coverage he is receiving, and there may be positive things about him. You're not going to hear any of them from me, but it's hard to not cover him negatively when he does things like insult Gold Star families, have 12 women come forward and complain of sexual assault and groping against him, when he has universities that are fraudulent. And that's just the tip of the iceberg. And it's interesting because there has been substantial negative coverage of Hillary Clinton as well. It's just when the side that's losing likes to point to media bias. There's an entire hour television show devoted to Bill Clinton's accusers. And during the debates, Fox News in particular has brought up negative things about Hillary Clinton. So you can throw media bias both ways, but it's not like the Clintons have been blanketed. And there's substantial coverage given to Donald Trump bringing the accusers to the second debate. So it's not like that there's a blackout on the other side of the Clinton scandals as well. And there's been generally a lot of coverage of the WikiLeaks documents as well. So I think it's interesting.
Have you ever seen those WikiLeaks documents? Whereas Hillary Clinton in email have mentioned derogatory comments towards minorities, and no media coverage have been covering that as something they would do for Trump.
Actually, if you go to the Hill and Political, there were articles written about comments made by her staff towards those groups, including Catholics and Latinos.
Not major TV news networks like CNN, MSNBC, Fox News, ABC, those kind of news networks.
I mean, there's nothing, you can't win this argument here. The side that's losing is always going to point to these things as opposed to accepting that their candidate is just losing. Donald Trump does not believe the election is going to be fair. He thinks it's going to be rigged. Donald Trump does not believe in the free media. He thinks it's rigged against him. So I'm very curious to see what parts of American democracy and civil society Donald Trump actually believes in.
Do you believe that people overall have been being very fair toward reporters in the election?
What was that?
Do you believe that the media, or not the media, but do you believe that candidates, I guess especially Trump, have been unfair and abusive toward reporters more so than they should be, I suppose?
You see, when you get into the media business, this is the kind of thing that you have to get used to. Presidents, vice presidents, Congress, they have favorability ratings that are off-skewed sometimes because there's some things that they do that people don't like. And this is the same thing that with media. You know, people usually don't like the media, and that's what they're kind of used to that.
People don't like the media because you have people like Donald Trump who undercut them, and there's it's good
People
that
don't like the media because they report bad news.
So there's
Very
attacking
biased
media.
news.
There's attacking media bias, which is fine. We should always be checking our media for bias. But then there's Donald Trump who levels vitriolic comments against the media and riles up his supporters to say awful things to the media. There's a difference between calling media bias, which I'm completely fine with, and then there's instructing your reporters to say awful things to them. And this isn't the first time that Donald Trump has incited violence against people when he suggested Hillary Clinton's Secret Service should de-arm and see what happens to her. And then he's like, oh, I really didn't mean anything by it. So he just undercuts
Those are
people.
just words, and Clinton actually murdered people.
I can't even respond to that one. But the thing is, Donald Trump is undercutting the media, and he sends vitriolic comments in their directions, and they should be concerned about their safety. They're doing their jobs, and they're covering the news. Disagree with how they're covering it, but attacking their safety is not part of American democracy, which I know Donald Trump has been struggling with.
Okay. So I guess kind of to go back to the Twitter area a little bit, I can't exactly say what tweets Kellyanne Conway was referring to with 88 to 85% of them. However, do you think that there's a line that reporters have to carefully toe between their personal opinions on their Twitter pages when they are, in a sense, representing a news organization versus their freedom of speech?
See, I could speak for this. I work with a lot of organizations and executives, and on my Twitter page, I put in my bio, the views are my own. And that's something that all media executives and staff should be doing as well, so that they wouldn't be attacked for something like this.
Yeah, I mean, you should never bring especially when you're moderating and when you're interviewing, you shouldn't bring your personal opinions into it. But this election represents something extremely difficult because you have an active campaign of lying by Trump's surrogates and Trump himself, where if you were to fact check it, it is just ridiculous how much he's lying. So you have this tricky
both candidates are lying.
You have this tricky job of journalists where they have to now balance because anytime they fact check Donald Trump, they're told, oh, you're biased against him. So is journalism about keeping fact and truth at the forefront, or is it about sitting there letting someone lie the entire time? I think a very difficult ethical question there with a Trump candidate like Donald Trump who lies as frequently as he does, and his surrogates who spin as much as they do.
Okay. Well, just how important do you guys believe Florida is, and who is winning Florida at this time? We'll be back with that information right after the break.
Valparaiso University, where passion meets purpose.
wrap up the show tonight, we focus in on one of the most important states of this election. New polls show Trump has a slight lead in Florida, which is a must-win. Scott McLean from CNN has more.
It's an unconventional campaign move, even for an unconventional candidate.
With the notable exception of 1600 Pennsylvania Avenue, this is the most coveted piece of real estate in Washington, D.C.
Donald Trump spent the morning opening his brand new hotel. Critics question the time off the trail so close to the election, but not his campaign.
And we're very excited to show America what this man actually does. He fixes things, he builds things.
The grand opening speech had a clear political message.
My theme today is 5 words: under budget and ahead of schedule. We don't hear those words too often in government, but you will.
Trump's running mate Mike Pence is also taking a detour, this one to reliably Republican Utah, where Trump is holding on to a less than comfortable lead. But Trump's work in battleground states may be paying off. The latest New Hampshire poll shows him closing the gap to just 4 points. And in Florida, a new poll shows him with a slight 2-point lead. Both polls are within the margin of error. Hillary Clinton is spending her 69th birthday fighting for support in Florida. But she also took time Tuesday to accept an endorsement from Adele, though she can't win the British singer's vote. Beyond the Washington ribbon cutting, Trump promised to focus on North Carolina, New Hampshire, and Florida. Nationally, he is slowly closing the gap, but with a new ABC News poll showing him still 9 points down, it's an uphill battle to win. In Washington, I'm Scott McLean.
Florida has traditionally been conservative-leaning. Do you guys think that this election will be the same? They'll go for Trump?
No, and just Clinton has been leading in 10 of the last 11 polls, and I know our friends on the right do not put much stock in polls anymore, so I'd just like to go with some of the numbers coming in from Florida from early voting. Republicans tend to win the state of Florida through absentee ballots. So in 2012, they had a 5% advantage in absentee ballot turn-ins. This year, they only have a 1.7% advantage in absentee ballots. Since 2012, Democrats have put up 100,000 voter registration surplus on the Republicans, and Florida as a whole is 3% less white than it was in 2012. And with Trump's approvals and numbers with minorities, none of those are shaping up to be an extremely positive outcome for Trump in Florida. And it's also important to note, Trump needs Florida to win the election. Hillary Clinton does not. But I do believe she's going to pull the state out, and there's nothing in the numbers that makes me think Donald Trump is going to do better. I think he's actually going to lose the state by a margin Republicans have not seen in a while.
So he pointed out that Florida is a very critical state for the Republican Party, and it has been a traditional battleground state. Well, the governor of Florida did endorse Donald Trump, and with his high approval ratings as governor, I think that the traditional Republican state is going to go lean Trump.
Yes, the traditional Republican state that went for Obama twice and now is going to go for Clinton again and has all the numbers leading in her direction. So Republicans win the absentee ballots. It's about a wash in the early voting, and then Democrats annihilate them on day of voting.
Trump.
And they're already behind in their absentee ballot thing, so it's a very hard margin to overcome at this point.
Trump is still leading the polls in Florida, according to CNN polls, by 2 points.
Clinton has led 10 of the last 11 polls, and the poll he was leading in was a Bloomberg poll, which is never tested in the state beforehand. So aggregate-wise, she's still leading. The race is tightening. I will give you that in the poll-wise. But looking at the early voting returns, it is all in Democrats' favor, and I'd be shocked to see it go for Trump. And I really don't know what approval numbers you're looking at. Rick Scott is not that popular.
She's led in the polls in the last few weeks, but today, since the FBI has reopened the investigation on her email accounts, well, those are likely to change from now until Election Day next Tuesday.
Yes, I'm excited for another investigation of Hillary Clinton because we've only had investigations of the Clintons by Republicans, just so everyone knows, for the last 30 years. And I love all the charges we've had and all the taxpayer dollars we've wasted. So good governance and fiscal conservatism, but not when you're targeting your political opponents. Spend away and target away.
Both the Supreme Court and the House of Representatives have investigated on Clinton, yes. And the House of Representatives did impeach Bill Clinton in the 90s.
Yes, and he left with some of the highest approval ratings of a modern president. And it backfired on the Republicans poorly. But yes, they did have one over his sex life, which Newt Gingrich loves because he's apparently accused Megyn Kelly and all the others of being obsessed with sex. Apparently the Republicans are.
Do you think that really the email issue or the reopening of the email investigation really be able to do much damage in the next week or two, or do you think it's pretty close to the election where
I think it's going to do a little bit of damage, as similar to Trump calling
saying to grab
the
women by their
comments about
genitals.
sexual assault?
So, yes, I think it'll have some impact, but early voting has already started. All the numbers that are coming in are seeing a huge surge of women voters, of minority voters in states that are going to swing, and is all in Hillary Clinton's favor at the moment.
You see, early voters are usually people, like millennials, who usually have work or school, and that's why Clinton is winning. But on election day, when more older people vote, then it's going to come out as Trump, as older people are more in favor of Trump.
The numbers aren't bearing that out, but I guess optimism is the only thing you can have left when you're losing this badly.
Yeah. Well, we will have one more show before the actual election, potentially, so we'll be able to touch on this topic one more time before we'll be able to discuss results. That about does it for us tonight at this edition of VALPO Town Hall. For Carlos Cabaya, Eric Smith, and all of us here at VUTV, have a great night, VALPO.